Hey everybody, it is October 7th, 2019. I'm going to go ahead and get the Q&A knocked out for the week. I actually recorded this once already, I accidentally deleted the video, went to get it edited and put up, and it was gone. So, couldn't find it. So, we're going to retry it here. Get right into it. All right. Over the years when backstage, I have seen competitors use all kinds of foods before prejudging. Everything from rice, sweet potatoes, rice cakes, peanut butter, Pop-Tarts, grape jelly, Reese's Cups, chocolate cake, bagels, etc. I know that it varies from person to person, but in general, what do you recommend? Well, first off, probably not going to want to introduce anything that's too foreign, just in case there's any GI distress. Last thing you want is to bloat because you ate something that didn't agree with you because you haven't had it for, however long or ever. But to be completely honest, the more I do this and the more I peak people, the less I like to have to do on the day of the show. Now, this really depends on what time is the person going on stage. If it's an evening prejudging, like maybe a national show, perhaps like NPC Nationals, for example, a lot of the bodybuilders, they won't go on till a lot later, okay? Or some of the girls won't go on till a lot later, the ones that have prejudging on Friday. But, in general, people are doing a morning prejudging. So I'm going to have people ready the night before. I'm going to have them full. If you're waking up and you're having to eat tons of food the morning of, you probably missed the boat somewhere. It happens, people wake up flat on Saturday, it happens. But the less food I could usually the least amount of food I can have someone do right before stage is the better. It's normally better. Just from a GI standpoint, you're not going to be able to cram down a bunch of food a couple hours before stage and then a bunch of it backstage and expect that to partition to muscles quickly and fill you out and make you look better. It's not going to happen. So, we really want to get the job early and then just kind of maintain. And then backstage, whatever, literally whatever digests well for you. I'll use quick digesting things, Rice Krispie treats, rice cakes work fine for a lot of people. If there's something else they've been using, then that's fine too. Might even just eat a regular meal couple hours out and then just use like a carb drink backstage if they need a little bit of glucose while they pump up. It's like carbs and electrolytes. And then if there's any various pump ingredients or anything that want to add on top of that, you can use it in like liquid form. It's good to have a little bit of fluid as they pump up for a lot of people. So, you can do just liquid. So yeah. And maybe if you want a little bit of candy, something to hit you quick, Reese's Cups work good for a lot of people. So, but stay away from anything that's going to be complex, hard to digest, or just you haven't had in, God knows how long. So that's normally safe. All right. For women, it seems pretty common to lose their cycles due to the dieting and stress, I assume. Is this necessarily bad, as most of the time it comes right back once they raise calories? Also, is a way to combat it. Yeah, this is very person dependent. There are girls, as soon as you put them in a calorie deficit and they start doing cardio or something, it's gone. Now, I've had other girls that have gotten in really good shape and not lost it at all, which that's probably not the norm, especially for like women's physique or figure where they're getting pretty hard. But yeah, it's totally just person dependent. The biggest thing, as you pointed out, is that it comes back afterwards. Now, I've worked with girls that they had some kind of bad past experience. Maybe their post-show period was just not very good, not constructed very well. There was a lot of hormonal neglect there. They didn't really recover, and they haven't had a period for 2 years. Maybe they were overtrained and under eating and all this stuff. And then we start working together and they get it all of a sudden after years. That happens. I just had a girl the other day, hadn't had one for a couple years, and she's been losing fat and she got it back. And she wasn't working with me previously. So, I think she was just very down-regulated for a long period of time, and we were able to fix it. But But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is, like I said, just getting it to come back. Can you combat it? I mean, not really, because the only way to really 100% combat it would be to just not get lean enough for that person, So the post show is everything. It's for men too, even just metabolically. I mean, post shows is big. You have to do things right. You have to get everyone back to homeostatic state as quickly and efficiently as possible. That's the biggest takeaway. Different type of contest prep, and I'm curious as to what nutritional strategy and timing would be for an all-day athletic event such as jiu-jitsu or wrestling tournament. Okay, well, I wrestled for a long time. Work with some wrestlers, fighters, different various athletes like that participate in endurance sports, especially like these all-day tournaments like that. Again, I don't want to push anything in there that's going to hurt GI function and it's going to be hard to digest. Now, there's two main situations. One, they have to make weight. Two, they're way underweight or they don't have a weight class or, whatever. So then they don't have to worry about it. If they have to make weight, probably going to do a little more water restriction rather than food. I can sneak in a little bit more food, maybe even through powders or just low volume foods the night before to have some calories in them. They're not completely depleted of glycogen and all that. And then refill, rehydrate after they weigh in. And meals pretty much stay, pretty typical. If they don't have to make weight, then, we'll just eat normally. And I would have them pretty full on glycogen and triglycerides the day before. And then the day of, we're just basically eating after matches to maintain, have a small amount of carb and fat, keep blood sugar stable, a little bit of protein in there. Just a balanced meal between each match and base, depending on hunger. That's pretty much it. I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to introduce a lot of foreign things. I'm not going to introduce anything that's going to be too overly complex that's going to sit in their gut all day. Like I'm not going to have meat, tons of veggies and something in between matches. But we're going to do balanced protein, carbs, and fat in between each meal. And then it would be the same for both scenarios, really. And then, it's hard for me to say how much just because it's really obviously going to be based on the size of the person, their metabolism, and what have you. But yeah. But yeah, that's about it. Do as much as you can leading up to it. And then, maintenance on the day of. If you have to really refill on the day of, then do it as quickly as possible after weigh-ins. That way the food's not sitting in their gut and they're not lethargic for the first match. That happens. You'll see good kids that wrestle lower seeded kids or jiu-jitsu. I imagine the tournament pairings are pretty similar and end up losing to a lower seeded person just because they're so sluggish. So you really want to refill as quick as possible. All right. On week 7 of contest prep, I was completely unable to have a bowel movement without suppository laxative. I would go 3 to 4 days and have a stomach that looked like a growth hormone gut. Okay. I was consuming plenty of fiber, and my coach was clueless. I was eating loads of egg whites and dropped them, and instantly everything returned to normal. Have you had this negative response from egg whites with clients? Another coach I talked to thought it was somehow related to sodium, but I can't seem to find any relation other than just poorly digesting egg whites. Well, electrolytes do have some interplay with digestion, so could be something. Doesn't sound like that's the case here, though. If you drop the egg whites and the problem was resolved, then that's it. You can have an intolerance to anything, but that's a pretty clear intolerance just through process of elimination. Now, as far as egg whites go, so people that have intolerances to eggs, it often seems like it's the whites more than anything. If you look at some of the information on food intolerances and common food intolerances, you'll see that out there too. I've noticed that in people, they just can't have egg whites. So I just wouldn't eat egg whites, pretty simple fix really. But yeah, that's not all that uncommon for people that have egg intolerance. So, all right. Moving on. What is your criteria for adjustment, whether to pull back on food or add in activity, or when to utilize certain tools such as clenbuterol, T3, etc.? So, okay, so I'm not sure if they're talking about my criteria for adjustment in general or my criteria as to when I would add in one versus the other. I'm going to go with that. I think that's probably what's being asked. Obviously, I mean, you think, you don't really want to use all of these fat loss tools, whether it be thyroid meds or beta receptor drugs, or anything really, or alpha receptor like yohimbine. You're not going to want to use that stuff right off the bat. If you can avoid it, you can save it for later. Easiest way to look at it is probably when I start seeing more signs of adaptation. They are adapting to changes quicker. They're not getting as much from the changes, dietary changes or cardio changes. They are deeper in the prep, or deeper in the fat loss phase. I'm assuming they're talking about prep. That's when the fat loss agents are going to be a little bit more useful to help combat those adaptions and push through them. Obviously thyroid, if there's someone's going to use exogenous thyroid, adding a replacement dose that's basically just going to bring you back up to normal physiological range of thyroid hormones, not necessarily pushing you hyperthyroid. So these large, massive doses really aren't necessary. Just a replacement dose that brings you up to high normal is going to be pretty useful and is going to keep everything functioning a lot better. It's not like going to keep you just indefinitely losing fat, but I mean, it's going to help and be pretty easy to recover from afterwards. So yeah, when the adaptions hit a little bit harder, that's when those things are going to become a little more useful. Now, you can also look at it in terms of what are you doing a lot of, what are you not doing a lot of, and you can try to balance it. I mean, I personally, and this doesn't always pan out, but like I would like to ideally have a balance of where I create the deficit from activity, from nutrition, from supplementation, and not just hammering one thing versus another. Now, with that said, there are people that do respond better to one thing versus another. There are people that whether you create a deficit on paper through activity or through food, it doesn't always pan out that way. And there's people that I can create the deficit through food and they just adapt until I add cardio. Even though, yeah, you can adapt, you can have cardio adaptions, and there are adaptions that occur in that sense, but some people just need that. Or some people, they have bad things start happening when you add tons of cardio, and they just do better with less food and less activity. So less food and less activity. So doing more through food and not making them move more than necessary because their body starts getting too stressed and shutting down. So, I mean, you got to know these things, or you at least try to pick up on these things if you can. Now, if it's balanced across the board, that's great. That doesn't always, that's not always what happens. And then, like I said, later on, as the adaptions start occurring, that's when your fat loss tools are going to come in. I don't have a time frame. It's not like I'm going to say, 8 weeks out, this starts, 6 weeks out, this starts, because it's silly. I mean, there's no reason to have it be set on that, because some things like clenbuterol, for example, I mean, it can cause a little bit more systemic stress. Yes, it has benefit, but it's causing potentially some more systemic stress on your nervous system. So if you don't need it, don't use it. If you need it later, use it later. If you need it earlier, well, use it earlier. Maybe start lower and ramp up, or just maintain lower dose. But there's no really set rule on when it needs to come in. It's just look for these adaptions and then try to combat them with these additional tools that you have. So I hope that kind of answers the question. All right. Any supplements you recommend to lower cortisol stress? If so, what dose? I.e. ashwagandha, vitamin C, etc. I really like Morphicom from Morphogen Nutrition. I know, shameless plug there. It is a good product though. Has phosphatidylserine in a pretty high dose. Has the adaptogenic component to it. Yeah, adaptogenic herbs are good. There's a lot of them. They all have some different effects, but they all generally the idea is that you are trying to improve stress response to any kind of stressor, whether it's exercise, whether it's environmental, whether, whatever it is, that's what you're trying to improve. So those things are great. Ashwagandha, like KSM 66, a common extract that's used, or sensoril, that's a good one at night. I feel like that one's a little more calming, about 300 milligrams or so. And the KSM, you could use 600 milligrams 1 to 2 times a day, usually 2 times, depending on if you're using the sensoril. Phosphatidylserine, 600 to 800 milligrams. Vitamin C. Most of the information you're going to see on vitamin C, if you're using it for this purpose, is going to be right around the 3 gram mark or so. If you're going to try that, I would say probably use like a buffered form or an ester C or something like that, because the real cheap ascorbic acid can make you have like diarrhea. So just be careful with that. But yeah, there's a lot of other adaptogenic herbs. I don't tend to throw a million things at someone. We use a couple tools, or I'll use the Morphicalm. But yeah, there are others like rhodiola, relora, different mushroom extracts. You can also, like you notice in the product, like the Morphicalm, it's also working on detoxification through an ingredient like calcium deglucarate. So that's helping liver detox toxins and helping you function better and helping you essentially respond to all those stressors better and insults that your body's constantly getting fed. So yeah, it's kind of comprehensive. I really like that product. Okay, next one. Thoughts on adding in NSAIDs a few days out from comp if legs are inflamed from cardio prep and holding water due to being battered. Yeah, that's pretty commonplace for a lot of people. I get what you're saying here, but I would rather just see someone pull cardio early enough. Here's what I could say, is that the difference you're going to visibly see from clearing inflammation by resting your legs a couple days out or a few days out is probably almost always going to be more noticeable than the advantage that you might see from doing that extra day of cardio. You see what I mean? You're going to see more visibly from clearing the inflammation than you are from continuing the cardio and trying to combat it with a meds. So I would just clear it with reducing activity, doing any other recovery modalities, resting your legs, Epsom salt baths. I like compression therapy. That's like the Normatec, cryotherapy, stuff like that. Obviously not everyone has access to that stuff, but that it does help. But yeah, clear the inflammation and take the extra day off the cardio. That would be my suggestion. All right. Peak week protocol. Oh, wow. I couldn't begin to answer that one here. That's a big one. I think we did an episode on peak week protocols on the Mind Body broadcast, talking about different scenarios, how they might pan out. We also did an interview episode with Cliff Wilson, I believe it was, on the Optimal Physique Development podcast, and talked about different peaking strategies there. So there's tons of info there. If you just go to the link tree in my Instagram bio, you can find the links to those shows. That's what I would suggest. I can really answer that here. But all right, guys, thanks for tuning in.